We use a lot of different stands in the film industry. And if you're new on set, it can be pretty daunting trying to sort through all this in your mind, what the stands are called, what they might be used for. Today, we're going to do our best to help you understand stands. Welcome to the Dapper Gaffer channel. We're here at City Stage Studios in Rockford, Illinois, talking about stands today. So when you're trying to categorize these in your mind, I would broadly think of them in 4 different groups. There's the baby stands with this 5/8 inch baby pin on it, and this all pertains to the type of equipment that you're going to mount on them. There's the junior stands with this junior receiver. There's the overhead roller stands that have usually a lollipop on it or a 4.5 inch grip head. And then while this is the same receiver as this one, it's a junior size receiver, you can see by the build of these things that they're just generally meant to carry much heavier pieces of equipment. And we're going to go through one category at a time to try to further understand what all these stands are doing. All right, so if we're going to further categorize these stands, what we're looking at is the height, what they're made of, and the base design. So we'll start with the C-stand here. We have a dedicated video on C-stands to check out because there's a lot to talk about here, but this is primarily used for holding grip equipment, and you'll almost always see it with this arm on here. And of course it's got this nesting foldable base on it, which none of these other stands have that style. So that's kind of its own thing. Then we go to Beefy Babies here. This is the workhorse of relatively lightweight fixtures. It's got the baby pin on top, but it's got this nice wide footprint, and it's called a Beefy Baby to distinguish it from something like this, which is something we call this a kit stand or a lightweight baby stand. And this is something, it's a little more common in the photo world, but you'd also find it in a kit, like this one's from an Airy kit. Their strength is that they're lightweight and easy to move around, but they're clearly not as strong as something like this. So this is not something we use nearly as much just because of its limitations in strength. But even amongst these Beefy Babies here, which all look very similar, they're actually made of different materials. So this is the most common type that we'll use, which is an all steel Beefy Baby. It's clearly going to be our strongest option, very sturdy. This one is made of aluminum, so it's a lot lighter weight than this one, but correspondingly weaker. It's stronger than this design because it's just, beefier stock material and such. When you get the shaft going higher, this becomes, a lot weaker in the air under a heavy load. But it's a better option than this. And then this one is kind of a hybrid between the two. It has some steel components, some aluminum components. The legs are steel, some of the hardware is steel, but it has some weight savings in the shaft here. And it's kind of a decent middle of the road option. This guy is called a preemie. It's just a cute little, this is an all steel baby stand, but it's just tiny for fitting into small spaces or maybe supporting the middle of a Dana dolly system. Putting a little light close to the floor. So this is a roller stand that's kind of got a wider base, as you can see. And this is something you would typically see used for a monitor, or maybe like a computer or something like that would be on this, just to kind of have that extra stability for that fragile sort of equipment. And this one, the legs actually fold up sideways on. And being lower like this You can drop the monitor nice and low to the floor if someone's viewing from a low chair or something like that, as opposed to a stool or standing. Gives some nice adjustability there. And then this baby roller is, as you can see, an older one, but this is something that you would often see in studios, not as much taken on location, because it's most useful when you're in a flat surface, but popular stand for just rolling lightweight fixtures around a studio floor situation. And one more stand I'd like to pull out before we switch to our next category is this combo stand. Why is it called a combo? Because it's a combination of a baby pin and a junior receiver. Which leads nicely into our next group of stands. Junior stands, or combo stands, which is it? Well, junior refers to this 1 1/8 inch receiver on here. Combo, as we discussed, is the combination of the 1 1/8 plus the 5/8 inch pin. But if someone's asking for a combo stand, they would be probably just as happy with one of these, which is actually just a junior stand. As you can see, it doesn't actually have a baby pin on there. Combo is often used somewhat generically to refer to a stand with a junior receiver on it. Essentially, they're wanting something to put a bigger light or a bigger modifier on. For instance, to stick with our mold theme here, a mold 2K will go in there, or maybe like a M18 or a sky panel or something with that, it's got more weight to it, it needs a beefier stand than those babies are going to confidently hold. You'd also use these types of stands just if you're generally using bigger modifiers or boom arms, menace arms, junior booms, things of that nature. You're gonna wanna mount that off of something with some more beef to it like this than trying to make a baby stand work for you. Now, just like we talked about with the baby stands, you're gonna look at similar features to differentiate further in this category. What are they made of? How tall are they? What do the bases look like? So these are both combo stands, but you can see this one's got 2 risers. This one's got 3. This one's gonna be taller. It's gonna go taller than this one. This one's gonna be a little bit lighter weight, but doesn't sacrifice any stability because they're both steel. They're both still made of steel. But you can also get aluminum combos. They're a little bit more of a bit of an oddball item, because typically if you're going to a combo stand like this, you're putting something heavier on it and you want the strength. If you have a light that's maybe borderline, you're not putting big modifiers on it or something like that, this can just help save your back if you need to carry it around a lot more at a location or something. That would be maybe a situation where I would use an aluminum combo. I don't like to rig off of these much, again, just because aluminum just is not as strong as steel. And I have seen them bend, and that's not a great situation. When we're looking at height, a short combo stand is called a low boy, like this guy here. And you can see, and this one's just a straight junior one, although we would still call it a low boy, so it doesn't have any baby pin on there. These are popular to use if you just need a light low to the floor, or putting like a slider or a Dana dolly sort of system on. This is something that you would use a lot of. And then this guy here is a junior roller, which is obviously an older style. It doesn't get used as much anymore, but something that lives, it's much more home in a studio environment than it is on location. You can also get slip-on wheels for these. So typically, if you're putting together a rental order or something, your combo stands are not gonna have wheels on them. You might want wheels on them because you know you're gonna be in some commercial facility where you're just gonna have to roll stuff for ages. That might be something you wanna add to your order. Actually, let's grab those wheels over there. Here we go. couple different manufacturers here, but they might also call these slip-ons because they slip onto the legs. This one's made by American, this one's made by Matthews. But yeah, the beauty is you can turn a stand like this that doesn't have wheels into a wheeled stand. And they've got brakes on them as well. Another thing that makes these combos different than our baby stands is the whole stand is just built stronger. Every bit of hardware on here is bigger. You can see in the leg here, this is a 3/4 inch steel stock, whereas this one is 1 inch. So everything is just going to be beefier and stronger on it. And you're going to want to keep that in mind if you're looking to get slip-on wheels too, because slip-on wheels for this are not going to work on that stand. One other place you can find a junior receiver is on some of your trusty old C stands. Not all C stands will do that, but if you have what's called a turtle-based stand, you can take the shaft off, and that's actually a junior receiver on there as well, which is just a handy piece of, just a handy rigging option to have on hand. Great for just putting a light down at the floor to bounce up off of something. Overhead stands. Overhead stands are broadly going to come in two types, rollers and walkers. Rollers are going to have wheels on them and are largely preferred. And then there's walkers, which you have to walk around. This is not an exhaustive collection, but just to kind of give you an example here. A standard combo, a standard 2-riser combo is only going to get you to 11 feet. You'll get 14, a little over 14 foot out of a triple riser. This goes all the way to 24 feet in the air or thereabouts, depending on the manufacturer. So just a big, beefy mambo stand. As you can see, it's got 4 risers on it as well. And compared to the combo stand we were just looking at, you can see the steel stock they use for these legs is even bigger. I think this is an 1.25 inches versus the 1 inch here. And if someone's asking for a daddy long legs, that's an alternate name for this stand. Mambo combo, daddy long legs, it's the same stand they're looking for. Now to transition over to the rollers, they're a little different in design. You can see that they have this method to be able to leave the wheels on the stands and solder them up like this. But you can see the connection point is actually a lot lower than this, even though the footprint is fairly similar. The Mambo's still a bit bigger. And you can get smaller versions of walker stands as well. And the advantage of those is the Rocky Mountain legs have more ability to adjust on a stand like this. This one doesn't have a Rocky Mountain leg on it. This one does. So you can get the rollers with Rocky Mountain legs, but it doesn't have quite the same amount of adjustment. Oh, this one is, oh, it's got holes in it, intentionally. You learn something new every day, kids. While it's great to have a little bit of adjustability in this Rocky Mountain leg format, it's not, you don't have quite as much just because of the angle of this leg as you do off of that higher connection point style of stand. So obviously one of the main advantages of working with roller stands is they roll around. You can put a frame on it with 2 guys, you can roll it around a set. But it's also with this lower connection point, kind of like the idea of a C stand where you can get it in closer to other items. This can maybe slide under a car, for instance, or maybe a piece of furniture. It can kind of get in lower places and be a little bit lower out of frame even than something like this with this super high connection point. Now looking at the tops of these stands, again, we call these lollipops, but they're just beefy grip heads essentially, bigger, 4.5 inch instead of 2.5. You'll see there's stands that actually come just with a lollipop on it, like that's the only option on here, and this one you can see doesn't even have a junior receiver on it, So this is straight up for holding big modifiers. This stand here actually has the lollipop with the junior receiver on it, so you could put a junior fixture or piece of hardware in the top of this without having to take this head off, because this is also a removable lollipop, which it gives you a bit more flexibility. Now without this on here, it's kind of more in the category of a junior roller stand. And a popular time to use a stand in this configuration would be primarily if you've got a light, like a bigger light with a heavy modifier on the front. People in the photo world, like with big umbrellas and stuff, this is one of their primary types of stands that they like to use for big lights, because it gives you that wide footprint, that low connection point. You can roll it around and just kind of leave the light living on here all day in a studio, for instance. But it's the same type of build as our overhead stands. 90% of the time that we're using these, it's for holding those big overhead diffusion frames, which is why they're called overhead stands. And how they do that is you're just going to loosen this knuckle on here, and this ear, with that T-shape on it, is going to slot in, catch that bolt, and that will hold your frame. Or there's also ears like this that will hold maybe booms or T-bars or things of that nature too. This is a high roller. You can also get a high roller, which is a little taller yet. But if you're a little vertically challenged, it can be a struggle to skin up a frame at this height. It is okay to step on a stand like this to get up here higher, but that's not going to help you too much if your frame's out here while we're skinning up. So just something to keep in mind. I generally prefer working with something like this, just because it gives you a better working height when you're putting things together. But if you know you're going to need to go particularly high, this is going to be the better choice. So the idea of crank stands is really just to help assist in lifting. For instance, this one's built to handle up to 200 pounds. These ones have pretty good weight capacities as well. But the idea is you can load something on there, at this height, and then crank it up, as opposed to having to load something on one of these other stands and manually lift the shaft and do each tie off as you go up. This is just a convenience thing, but also a safety thing to have that feature. This stand, for instance, is going to have no problem holding this beastie old 2500 watt Luxarc HMI here. I don't know how heavy this thing is offhand, and it's kind of hard to find the specs for, but trust me when I say it's a beast. So before I lift this up, I'm just going to make sure that this is backed out so it's ready to pop in there. Ugh. This might have been better to do as a two-man operation. Lock that off in there, and then crank her up. And you can see on this style, both of those shafts actually raise at the same time with the cable system that they have inside. Then I let this catch out to lock it into place. Now, some people think that these stands are meant to just be really tall. That's not actually their primary purpose. In fact, one of these stands will only go about as high as a standard combo stand. It's more about the weight that they can hold and the ease of lifting that weight in the air. I was just watching Back to the Future with my kids this week, and I saw a couple of these in the background of one of the behind-the-scenes shots. Interesting factoid of the day for you. Now, something about these crank stands is you always want to make sure that there's a load on them when you're lifting them. Because of the cable system and how a lot of these are designed, and not having to remember which ones are designed in this way and which ones are not, if you don't put a load on while you're raising these, the cable system inside can actually come off the tracks and then that's got to go in for repair, and that's not great for anybody. So just always before you go around and start cranking these stands up, make sure you have some sort of load on it. You'll see, grips if they're maybe, testing the height or something on it. They'll even just throw a sandbag on there before the light's ready, just because it's standard practice that you don't crank these things without a load. Now this guy here is, it's like a lightweight crank stand or a mini Vader. This would be called the Crank-A-Vader. That's a Matthews branded deal. This is a similar idea, but just with a lighter weight capacity. 200 some pounds. This one's good for about 80. A lot lighter weight than that one, obviously, and you can also get the slip-on wheels for it to make it operate a little bit more like that. This stand is a little less common in the film world. You see it a lot more in a stills environment, but still a handy stand, particularly in a studio. It's not quite as beefy as these other ones. I believe it holds up about 65 pounds, which is still a fair amount of weight, more than you want to put on like a baby stand, for instance. But it's more in like the Avenger Manfrotto kind of build style, and it's got this step on here if you needed to, step up on there. Some nice options. But again, it's about the ease of getting something with a bit of weight up in the air. And then this will have a little lock off that goes in these holes here, like a pin to just completely keep it from coming back down. And then you can also tighten these up to prevent it from wobbling. After this has been sitting, to be able to pull this pin out, I would recommend cranking this up slightly just to really relieve the pressure on it. And let her back down. So aside from heavy fixtures or maybe some fixtures with modifiers on them, another thing that's popular to use crank stands for is like lifting truss. You can put a crank stand on either side, depending on what kind of capacity you need on that truss that's holding whatever you're holding up there. And then, for instance, if you were using two of these, 200 pounds apiece, that means that your truss, including the weight of the truss, this is going to hold up 400 pounds. And then you would just get someone on either side of that truss, crank them up at the same time. And there are other, again, this is not an exhaustive collection of crank stands. There are newer versions of some of these, like a Roadrunner, or Blackbird is another one. A Blackbird's you can get tall versions of these too, like a Long John Silver. That's an Avenger brand stand that's very popular, very expensive, but they're this sort of kind of Crank-A-Vader style, but even beefier and bigger pneumatic outdoor wheels. So if you're using big lights outdoor on location, you might look into renting something like that. This Crank-A-Vader is something that you'll more often see in a studio, as you can see by the type of wheels that it has on it. If it's something that you're bringing out into the field, those bigger pneumatic wheels like you might find on a production cart are more likely to be seen. So that's crank stands for you. Well, this hasn't been an exhaustive collection of stands we brought out today. I think we've shown you enough to give you an idea of what you're going to run into out there on set, maybe give you a little more confidence. But if there's anything you feel like we didn't touch on or you like more clarification about, feel free to drop it in the comments and we'll do our best to answer those questions intelligently. That's all we got for today. We'll see you on the next one.